In this episode of Wow, I've done a lot of these, today we'll be talking about Oliver Cromwell, more specifically his head. I know it's a bit of a weird subject, but bear with me, and no, there won't be any gore-ish. Rule of thumb, if you can handle Egyptian mummies in all their terrifying glory, you can handle this. But first, who was Oliver Cromwell? For the quite a lot of Americans watching, Oliver Cromwell is quite an important figure in British history. Born in 1599 and educated in Sydney, Sussex College, Cambridge, Oliver Cromwell was from a modest background but was descended from wealthy landowners and friends of the Tudor royal family. In 1628, he became a member of Parliament. No, not that Parliament. You got it wrong. It's not that Parliament. That's a modern Parliament. It's this Parliament that burnt down and doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, that Parliament, under the reign of King Charles I, who often argued and disagreed with it. As a result, a year later, Parliament was permanently dissolved. Well, for now, so that was fun while it lasted. 11 years later, Parliament reappeared, and Cromwell attended for 3 weeks, at which point it was dissolved again. You may have noticed quite a lot of power struggles between King Charles I and Parliament. Well, this soon escalated into the Civil War. And no, not the one in America, this is the English Civil War, which was technically 3 wars, the first in which Cromwell turned from an MP, Member of Parliament, to a commander of parliamentary forces against the king. This was quite successful and Charles was arrested, but he later escaped, leading to the Second Civil War, and also the third one as well. To cut a very long story short, the king lost the war and Britain pulled a France and cut off the head of Charles I. Cromwell became Lord Protector and ruler of the UK for 5 years, where he introduced Puritan values, banned a whole bunch of fun stuff as it was considered sinful, and then he died and was buried in Westminster Abbey. The whole video so far has just been filling you in on who he was. I've been generalising massively for most of it. It's just to give you a sense of who he was. We haven't even gotten to the story proper yet. Well, okay, if you think about it, his head was attached during all this, so I guess it counts. Anyway, his son Richard wasn't very good at being Lord Protector after him, so resigned. So they brought back the Oh yeah, I forgot about that. So they brought back his son, now called Charles II. He was nicknamed the Merry Monarch, had a bunch of parties, brought back all the fun things that Oliver had banned, and everyone loved him. So much that they dug up Oliver Cromwell, after being dead for a couple years, and executed him on the anniversary of the execution of King Charles I. Looks like the mob had a sense of irony. At this point, his head was removed from his body and stuck on a pole on Westminster Hall. We don't know what happened to the body, but it's really not important. His head stayed on the pole until 1685, where it broke in a storm and was reportedly stolen by a soldier, who smuggled it home and hid it in his house up his chimney, which is quite a decent place to hide something when you think about it. It is thought that it was retrieved some years later when everyone had stopped worrying about its disappearance and was sold to Claudius du Pay, who owned a display of curiosities. Just an editing note, by the way. Everyone involved with the story, until we get into the very modern kind of 1920s, 1950s, seems to have an irrational fear of their own face. So I can't find any pictures of any of them. So these are just placeholders. Just bear that in mind. This is not what they actually look like. It's just an approximation. Anyway, he died, and it was sold to Samuel Russell, a distant relative of Cromwell, or so he claimed, who didn't care for the head like he probably should have. These things are fragile. How irresponsible. Look at that smug face. He knows what he did. Russell tried to sell it to Sydney Sussex College that you remember Oliver attended when he was young, but the university didn't really want such a thing. I can see their point. It was then bought by a watchmaker, James Cox, when he saw its likenesses to portraits of Oliver, and wanted it for himself because he knew it could only go up in value. In 1799, 141 years after Oliver Cromwell's death, James Cox sold the head for over double the original cost to an exhibition of Oliver Cromwell memorabilia on Old Bond Street, which is one of the green ones in Monopoly. But the whole thing was a failure, and people were sceptical that it was real, as any sensible person really would be. One of the relatives of the exhibition sold the head to Josiah Wilkinson, who kept the head and showed it to whoever wanted to see it, this curiosity, which a lot did, never mind if they thought it was real or not. Loads of people denounced it as fake, but at the time, the famous physician and early supporter of evolution, George Rolleston, compared it with other skulls claiming to be from Cromwell. Yes, there are quite a few others, and supported the idea that this was one that was real. He was right, by the way. We pretty much know for certain that he was right. During the period 1850 to 1950, various scientific examinations and tests were done to the skull, now owned by the grandson of Josiah, Horace Wilkinson. Some were unable to confirm or deny the validity, but the majority consensus was this was genuine, as it matched up with the portraits in the death mask made soon after his death. Do you guys know what a death mask is? I might have to explain that too. Basically, soon after death, a plaster mould is made of a subject's face for statues and portraits and stuff like that. Here's one from Abraham Lincoln. William Shakespeare? Sure. Stalin? Why not? Tesla, Napoleon, Thomas Edison, George Washington, Beethoven, Henry VII, Benjamin Franklin, Newton, the list goes on. Why do they do this? Well, a death mask is an extremely accurate way of preserving the face of an individual once they have died and are going to be buried. Here's Oliver Cromwell's. And here's his skull. They may not look the same literally at all, but the features do line up, especially when you overlay them, as I did earlier in the video. Bonus points for the original pole fragment it was on, as this is the same pole that it was mounted to on top of Westminster Hall back in 1685. Horace Wilkinson died in 1957 and his son inherited it. And to make it even more confusing, he was also called Horace, but this Horace didn't like the public displays and wanted a respectful end to Oliver Cromwell's story, which brings us here to Sidney Sussex College, Cambridge, which Oliver attended in his early life. On the 25th of March 1960, with permission from the owner, the head was buried somewhere under the antechapel inside the college, but crucially, no one knows precisely where, as so the head will be buried forever. So, under that building, our story ends. Well, hopefully it will. That skull has seen enough, and it deserves some rest after the 3 centuries, or 4 centuries, or however long it is. If you want to learn more about the head, I would recommend Severed by Francis Larson. It helped me write this script and also details many more similar stories. And before the video ends, I would like to point out this isn't a unique phenomenon. As well as the other stories in Francis Larson's Severed, other remains have undergone similar travels. Richard III was buried under a car park. George Washington had a tomb underneath the Capitol building. Adolf Hitler's body was stolen by the KGB and then cremated off a building. Who says your life can't be interesting after it ends? Well, okay, I do. Now go away.